This story isn't clickbait, it's about a real HOA president named Eleanor who tried to destroy a couple's reputation after they challenged one of her petty rules. It ended with Eleanor being arrested by federal agents after she hired fake HOA officers to publicly humiliate the husband with false sexual harassment claims. Here's what happened. Willow Creek Estates looked perfect from the outside, nice houses, clean streets, manicured lawns. But living there felt tense because of Eleanor Vance, the HOA president. Eleanor was attractive and always well-dressed, but she ruled the neighborhood like a dictator. Her rules were extreme and the punishments severe. If your grass grew a fraction of an inch too tall, you got fined. Holiday decorations needed approval weeks in advance, with detailed plans submitted for review. Trash cans visible for too long, that's another fine. And these weren't small penalties, we're talking hundreds of dollars for infractions most people wouldn't even notice. Most neighbors just paid up and stayed quiet. They were afraid of attracting Eleanor's attention. She loved this control and the fear it created. It was her little kingdom, and she was the queen. Nobody challenged her decisions because the consequences were swift and expensive. Eleanor's power came from her meticulous attention to rules that she selectively enforced. Some people seemed immune to her scrutiny while others faced constant citations. Many suspected she played favorites or held grudges, but nobody could prove it. Residents would complain to each other behind closed doors, but publicly, they smiled and nodded when Eleanor spoke at meetings. The neighborhood association meetings were essentially Eleanor's show. She controlled the agenda, dominated discussions, and always got her way on votes. Board members who dared to oppose her often found themselves subjected to anonymous complaints about their properties. Eventually, the board filled with her allies or people too intimidated to speak up. David and Veronica Miller moved into the Henderson house on Elm Street in the spring. They both worked remotely, David in tech and Veronica as some kind of consultant. They seemed normal and kept to themselves at first, politely waving to neighbors but not getting too involved in community activities. The trouble started when they put up a bird feeder in their backyard. It wasn't large or gaudy, just a simple wooden structure that attracted songbirds. Eleanor claimed it violated a rule about unapproved structures and fined them $75. She taped the notice right to their front door where everyone could see it, a classic Eleanor power move designed to embarrass new residents into compliance. Most people would have just paid the fine and removed the feeder. That's what Eleanor expected. But at the next HOA meeting, David showed up. Veronica sat quietly beside him, observing everything. When the meeting opened for resident comments, David stood up and calmly addressed the issue. "I've read through the HOA guidelines 3 times, he said politely. "The rule about structures is unclear at best. Our bird feeder is small, unobtrusive, and actually enhances the natural beauty of the neighborhood. Several other houses have similar items that haven't been cited." The room went silent. Nobody challenged Eleanor like this, especially not in public. Everyone watched her reaction, holding their breath. Eleanor's smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened. "Mr. Miller," she said in that smooth but cutting tone she used when asserting authority, "rules are rules. They protect our property values. The fine stands." But David wasn't intimidated. He calmly pointed out the Gundersons' giant pink flamingo that had been in their yard for years without issue. He mentioned the Petersons' elaborate wind chimes and the Johnsons' garden gnome collection. All technically violations, all overlooked. "It seems the rules aren't applied consistently," he concluded. "I'm simply asking for the same consideration others receive." Eleanor's face flushed slightly. The board members looked uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact with both David and Eleanor. Veronica just watched, her expression unreadable as she took in every reaction in the room. The Millers lost that battle, the board voted to uphold the fine. But they'd done something important. They'd shown they weren't afraid of Eleanor. This public challenge to her authority made Eleanor furious. She couldn't stand being questioned, especially by newcomers who hadn't learned their place yet. After the meeting, Eleanor launched a campaign against the Millers. It started with small things that quickly escalated. Suddenly, their property was under constant scrutiny. Violation notices appeared weekly. Their lawn was improperly maintained, though it looked the same as always. Their trash cans were visible for 5 minutes too long on collection day. Anonymous complaints about excessive noise arrived for evenings when they were reading quietly. Citations for unauthorized plantings when Veronica added some native perennials to their garden. Warnings about their car being parked improperly in their own driveway. The harassment was obvious to everyone. Neighbors whispered about it. "She's really targeting them," Mrs. Gable told me over the fence. "It's awful." All because David spoke up about that bird feeder. But the Millers handled it remarkably well. They documented everything with photographs and timestamps. They responded to each notice with calm, factual rebuttals. They measured their grass height, recorded when their trash cans were put out and taken in, and kept logs of their activities during times when noise complaints were filed. They refused to be bullied, which only made Eleanor angrier. Her usual tactics weren't working. Most people either gave in or moved away when Eleanor targeted them. The Millers did neither. They stood their ground and followed proper procedures to contest each citation. Eleanor's frustration grew visible. At neighborhood gatherings, she'd glare at the Millers when she thought no one was looking. She tried to turn other residents against them, making comments like, "Those Millers think they're above the rules the rest of us follow." But many neighbors secretly admired the couple for standing up to her. After about a month of failed harassment, Eleanor suddenly changed tactics. She announced a big neighborhood barbecue at her house, something she'd never done before. She called it a community building event and made a special point of inviting everyone, including the Millers. Most of us were suspicious. Eleanor wasn't known for her hospitality or community spirit. But curiosity won out, and nearly everyone attended, including David and Veronica. At the party, Eleanor was like a different person. She smiled, laughed, and played the perfect hostess. But the strangest part was how she focused on David Miller. She sought him out by the drinks table and spent a long time talking to him. She laughed loudly at his comments, touched his arm occasionally, and asked detailed questions about his work. From across the patio, Veronica watched this interaction. She didn't seem jealous or upset, just observant, like she was collecting information. There was something calculating in her gaze that made several neighbors uncomfortable. Eleanor's friendly behavior toward David continued for 2 weeks after the party. She'd wave enthusiastically if she saw him getting the mail or working in the yard. Once she even stopped by their house with a small potted plant as a welcome to the neighborhood gift, despite the fact they'd lived there for months already. All of this was very public. She made sure neighbors witnessed these interactions. "Looks like Eleanor's finally warming up to them," Mr. Henderson commented one evening. Many people were relieved, thinking the conflict had been resolved, but those who knew Eleanor best remained suspicious. This wasn't reconciliation, it was setup. She was building a specific narrative of friendly interaction with David, especially creating witnesses, establishing a pattern. We didn't realize then what she was planning, but in hindsight, the strategy was clear and calculated. The confrontation happened on a Tuesday afternoon. David was in the garage organizing tools while Veronica worked inside. A car pulled up, and 2 men approached their door. They knocked loudly and officially. David opened the door with Veronica appearing behind him. The men wore navy blue uniforms with badges that read Willow Creek HOA Compliance Division. This immediately raised red flags because no such division existed in our HOA structure. David Miller, the taller man, asked gruffly. "Yes," David replied, already looking suspicious. "You need to come with us," the second man said, stepping forward aggressively. "A serious complaint has been filed against you." David frowned. "Complaint? What complaint? And who are you?" "There's no HOA compliance division here. We're authorized HOA officers," the first man insisted, pulling out plastic zip-tie handcuffs. "We're taking you in regarding serious allegations made by Ms. Eleanor Vance." Veronica moved forward then, placing a hand on David's arm. Her eyes weren't showing fear, they were focused and assessing. "What allegations?" she asked firmly. The taller fake officer smirked unpleasantly. "Your HOA president, Eleanor Vance, filed a report alleging that your husband repeatedly harassed her, made unwanted sexual advances, and tried to pressure her into sleeping with him." David's face showed shock, then rage. What? That's a complete lie. That's absolutely insane. I barely even talked to the woman. This is crazy. Veronica's grip tightened on David's arm. Her face showed surprise, but also something else, a cold determination. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she studied the men more carefully. We have her sworn statement right here, the second man said, waving a paper. You're coming downtown. He reached for David's arm. By now, neighbors were noticing the commotion. Mrs. Gable stood on her porch across the street. Toby next door had his phone out, recording everything. People were emerging from their houses, drawn by the raised voices. This was Eleanor's revenge, and it was far worse than petty fines. She was trying to destroy David's reputation, his marriage, and possibly even get him arrested, all based on a completely fabricated story. The vindictiveness was shocking, even for Eleanor. He's not going anywhere with you, Veronica said. Her voice remained calm but had a steely quality that made several neighbors take notice. She positioned herself slightly in front of David, facing the two imposing men without a trace of fear. The fake officers seemed surprised by her resistance. This doesn't concern you. Step aside, the taller one ordered. It concerns me when two men impersonating officers attempt to detain my husband based on lies, Veronica countered, her gaze steady. Show me your real identification. Your peace officer credentials. Not those plastic badges. And show me the official mandate for this compliance division and its power to arrest. They scoffed, trying to dismiss her. We don't need to show you anything. Oh, I think you do. Veronica's voice dropped lower. Because right now, you're committing several felonies. Impersonating officers. Attempted kidnapping. Conspiracy. Harassment. Defamation. Shall I continue? David found his voice again. Eleanor is lying. This is retaliation. Ask anyone. The neighbors began murmuring their support. She's right. This isn't right. Never heard of HOA police before. Eleanor's gone too far this time. The fake officers, let's call them Bradley and Kimball, started looking nervous. This wasn't going as planned. They were supposed to quickly grab David, create a public scene of humiliation, and then take him somewhere to process him. They hadn't expected this resistance or the public questioning of their authority. We have a signed statement from Ms. Vance. Kimball insisted, waving the paper again. Veronica didn't bother looking at it. Instead, she seemed intensely aware of her surroundings, the gathering neighbors, Toby's phone recording everything. Then she did something subtle. She tapped her smartwatch twice in a specific pattern. It was such a small gesture that most people missed it. Eleanor Vance's statement is worthless because it's a fabrication, Veronica stated with absolute certainty. And you two are her paid accomplices, digging yourselves into a very deep legal hole. Bradley grew impatient and lunged toward David. Enough talk. Let's go. What happened next was so fast that many neighbors later disagreed about exactly what they saw. Veronica moved with surprising precision. She didn't attack Bradley, but simply placed her hand against his chest with perfect timing and positioning. It stopped his momentum completely, causing him to stumble backward in surprise. I strongly suggest, Veronica said, her voice dangerously quiet, that you get back in your car and leave. Immediately. Before real law enforcement arrives. As if on cue, sirens sounded in the distance. They weren't the familiar wail of local police cruisers, these were deeper, more insistent. And they were approaching rapidly. Bradley and Kimball froze, looking at each other with real fear. They glanced at their car, then back at the approaching sirens. Their confidence evaporated as they realized they were trapped. During this entire confrontation, Veronica had remained calm and controlled. She hadn't screamed or panicked. She'd used words, reason, and an unexpected physical competence to defuse the situation. And somehow, she'd summoned serious help with just a tap on her watch. The sirens grew louder, and then two black government SUVs turned onto Elm Street. They moved with purpose, expertly boxing in the fake officer's sedan so there was no escape route. For people emerged from the vehicles, two men and two women in business casual clothing. They didn't wear uniforms, but they moved with unmistakable authority and coordination. Their radios crackled softly as they established a perimeter. Their leader was a silver-haired woman with sharp eyes who walked directly toward the miller's porch. She ignored the gawking neighbors and focused entirely on the situation at hand. Bradley and Kimball looked terrified. All their fake swagger had vanished completely. The silver-haired woman stopped a few feet away from the porch. She gave Veronica a subtle nod of recognition before addressing the situation formally. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller." Her voice was calm but carried undeniable authority. "Agent Margaret Hall, federal authorities." She displayed a gold badge that was clearly legitimate. "We received an alert regarding potential criminal activity, including impersonation of officers and attempted unlawful detainment based on a false report." The specificity of her statement was striking. Veronica hadn't just called for help, she'd somehow conveyed the entire context of the situation through her watch. Agent Hall turned to Bradley and Kimball. "Gentlemen, hands where I can see them. Now." Kimball panicked and tried to run. He made it 3 steps before 2 agents had him face down on the grass, handcuffed and secured. Bradley just stood frozen, raising his trembling hands. An agent searched him and found a cheap handgun in his waistband. He was quickly disarmed and cuffed against his own car. The entire takedown took less than 30 seconds. It was executed with a level of efficiency that suggested these weren't ordinary local law enforcement. Agent Hall turned back to the Millers. "Are you both unharmed?" "Yes. We're all right now." "Thank you, Agent Hall," Veronica replied steadily. "These individuals," Hall nodded toward the restrained men, "were attempting to detain your husband based on a complaint filed by Eleanor Vance." "Correct. That's what they claimed." "Yes," Veronica confirmed. "A completely false and malicious accusation against my husband." At that moment, Eleanor Vance herself appeared, walking briskly down the street. She'd clearly been drawn by the sirens but expected a very different scene, probably David being hauled away in disgrace. Her confident expression quickly transformed into confusion and alarm when she saw her hired men in handcuffs and federal agents controlling the situation. "What in the world is going on?" she demanded, attempting to sound authoritative despite her obvious shock. "Are these men arresting David Miller? I'm the one who called the HOA compliance." Agent Hall turned slowly to face her. "Are you Eleanor Vance?" "Yes. I'm president of this HOA." Eleanor tried to puff herself up importantly. "And I demand to know why you are interfering." Agent Hall regarded her silently for a moment. There is no Willow Creek HOA compliance division. These men are not officers. They are committing serious felonies. At your direction." Eleanor visibly paled. "My direction? That's absurd. They work for the HOA. I filed a legitimate complaint against Mr. Miller for harassment." "No, you did not," Agent Hall stated firmly. "You hired these 2 individuals, provided them with fake uniforms and badges, and instructed them to unlawfully detain Mr. Miller based on a deliberately fabricated story of sexual harassment. A story designed to ruin his reputation as revenge for a minor disagreement." The neighborhood collectively gasped. The level of detail Agent Hall possessed was astonishing. Veronica must have provided comprehensive intelligence about the entire situation. "Furthermore," Hall continued, "we have confirmation of financial transactions between you and these men. We also have recovered communications detailing this entire illegal arrangement." One of the agents restraining Kimball spoke up. "His already talking, said Vance paid them cash, gave them the uniforms, told them exactly what to say, said she wanted Miller publicly humiliated." Eleanor's composure completely collapsed. "Lies. All lies," she shrieked, her perfect facade shattering. "He's just trying to save himself. David Miller is a creep. He came on to me. At my party." David stepped forward, his voice shaking with controlled anger. "That is a disgusting lie, Eleanor. Everyone saw us talk for maybe 5 minutes. You approached me. This is sick revenge." Agent Hall raised her hand, ending the argument. "Ms. Vance, filing a false police report, especially one involving fabricated allegations of sexual misconduct, is a very serious crime. Conspiracy to commit unlawful detainment, impersonation of officers, witness tampering, The list is quite long. Eleanor stood trembling, speech failing her. The power she'd wielded through fear and manipulation had no effect against federal agents with hard evidence. Eleanor Vance, Agent Hall announced formally, "You are under arrest." 2 agents approached Eleanor and handcuffed her. As they led her toward one of the SUVs, her shocked eyes met Veronica's. In that brief exchange, Eleanor seemed to finally understand the magnitude of her mistake. She hadn't merely targeted an ordinary resident, she'd chosen to attack someone with connections and capabilities far beyond anything Eleanor could have imagined. Local police arrived shortly after, and Agent Hall's team formally transferred the prisoners to their custody along with preliminary evidence. The federal agents departed as quickly as they'd arrived, leaving the neighborhood in stunned silence. Within hours, Elm Street was buzzing with activity and discussion. Neighbors gathered in small groups, sharing what they'd witnessed and speculating about what had happened. Many approached David and Veronica to offer support and apologize for not standing up to Eleanor sooner. David explained Eleanor's vendetta and the horrible accusation, visibly shaken by how close he'd come to being publicly humiliated. He kept Veronica's role somewhat vague, focusing instead on Eleanor's increasingly unhinged behavior. Veronica played her part well, the supportive wife relieved that the situation had been resolved. But those who had witnessed her confront the fake officers, who had seen her quiet confidence and the respect Agent Hall showed her, suspected there was much more to her story than remote consultant. News of Eleanor's arrest spread rapidly through Willow Creek and beyond. The headlines were sensational: HOA president arrested in bizarre revenge plot, fake cops and false accusations, HOA power struggle goes criminal. After years of suffering under Eleanor's petty tyranny, many residents felt a guilty satisfaction in her downfall. The HOA quickly collapsed. Eleanor's allies on the board resigned immediately, distancing themselves from the scandal. An emergency meeting elected a new, temporary board committed to reforming the excessive rules and penalties Eleanor had established. Suddenly, bird feeders, garden gnomes, and slightly overgrown lawns weren't considered capital offenses anymore. Legally, Eleanor's case progressed quickly. Bradley and Kimball provided detailed confessions, hoping for leniency. They confirmed every aspect of her scheme: the payment, the fake uniforms, the script she'd given them, and her explicit instructions to humiliate David publicly. With this testimony plus whatever electronic evidence Veronica had somehow provided, Eleanor's defense crumbled. Her lawyer advised a plea deal. For David and Veronica, life slowly returned to normal. The immediate threat was gone, but the experience left its mark. David was deeply shaken by how easily someone could fabricate such a damaging lie. Veronica remained his steadfast support, but neighbors noticed she seemed more vigilant now, more aware of her surroundings. Her secret remained just that, a secret. The official story was straightforward. Veronica had called 911, and federal agents responded because impersonating officers is a federal crime. Agent Hall's team happened to be in the area. It was plausible if you hadn't seen the whole event unfold, if you hadn't noticed the silent communication between Veronica and Agent Hall, if you hadn't seen her tap that watch with such confidence. In the months that followed, Willow Creek Estates became a different place. The new HOA board abolished most of Eleanor's ridiculous rules. People planted flowers without permission. Children played outside without fear of noise complaints. Residents actually spoke to each other more, united by their shared experience under Eleanor's reign and her dramatic downfall. Eleanor Vance pleaded guilty to multiple charges. She received a sentence that included some jail time, lengthy probation, community service, and substantial fines. Her reputation was destroyed, and her assets depleted by legal fees. She sold her house through a proxy and disappeared from Willow Creek completely. David and Veronica stayed. They became a symbol of standing up to bullies in the neighborhood. They put their bird feeder back up in exactly the same spot, a small but significant statement. Their relationship seemed stronger for having weathered the crisis together. Most neighbors never asked Veronica about her background or her connection to Agent Hall. It simply wasn't done. But many wondered privately, who was she really? What did she actually do? What resources and connections did she have that allowed her to neutralize Eleanor's scheme so efficiently? Willow Creek is peaceful now, genuinely so, not just superficially. The lawns are still well maintained, But the residents seem happier and less afraid. Those of us who witnessed Eleanor's reign of terror and her spectacular downfall learned an important lesson. You never really know who your neighbors are, and sometimes, karma doesn't just knock politely, it arrives with federal agents and handcuffs, especially when you mess with the wrong person's husband.